Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Curie, Emergent Intelligence. So this is one of the commanders from the Fallout set. It is a 2-mana blue 1/3 legendary artifact creature robot, and it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its base power, and 1 in a blue, exile another non-token artifact creature you control. It becomes a copy of the exiled creature, except it has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its base power. So obviously, we're going to want Pump, but a very specific Pump. And the two kinds of restrictions that we're playing around is, one, how do we get Pump spells in mono blue? And secondly, how do we get Pump spells that aren't just temporary plus effects or +1 counters, but actually change the power of Curie? Since obviously we want to draw a whole bunch of cards via attacking with it. Also, Curie does not have any ability to fly or otherwise evade blockers inherently, so we're going to need a way to do that as well. So for that, we have a number of different options. We have our permanent-based ones and then our temporary-based ones. So we have cards like Ensoul Artifact, which is probably the best out of all of them. We can just slap this on Curie, and Curie becomes a 5/5, and then every time we hit somebody with Curie, we draw 5 cards. Similarly, Skilled Animator will turn Curie into a 5/5. Blackstaff of Waterdeep will turn it into a 4/4. Unctus's Retrofitter will turn it into a 4/4. And Zoetic Glyph will turn it into a 5/4. We also have some temporary pump spells. Now, the benefit of these is that they usually either cantrip or they just cost less than the permanent-based ones, but obviously they're not permanent, so we have to keep playing more of them, but hypothetically, we should draw into more as we are drawing a lot of cards. So the baseline is cards like Behind the Mask, which turns it into a 4/3, so at base, we're talking about 1 mana equals 4 power, so we've got Behind the Mask. Dreadful as the Storm, which is 5/5, but obviously it costs 3 mana. Gift of Tusks, which is only 3/3. Majestic Metamorphosis, which is 3 mana for 4/4, but it also gives flying and draws a card. Mordenkainen's Polymorph, which is 4/4 for 2 and gives it flying. Phantasmal Form, which is only 3/3, but it gives it flying and draws a card. Relics War, which is another 1 mana for 4/3. Serpentine Ambush, which is 2 mana for a 5/5. Startling Development, which is 2 mana for a 4/4, and it just happens to have cycling if you don't want this card for whatever reason. Suit Up, 3 mana for a 4/5, and it draws a card. Water Wings, which is 4/4 and flying, and importantly, hexproof, so a way to protect Curie. Wings of Velasvel, which is 4/4 and flying. And finally, Zalfiran's Shapecraft, which is 4/3 and draw a card. And then aside from those, we have a bunch of evasion cards. So some of these are cards we already saw, like Wings of Velasvel, but aside from those, we have Air Bladder, which is an aura that gives flying. Aqueous Form, which gives unblockable and attack scry 1. Arcane Flight gives flying. Notable, it also gives +1, but that will not be factored into the card draw. Then we've got Flight, Fly, which is also flying, but you get to venture into the dungeon when we deal damage. And then we have Silver Shroud Costume, which the turn that this enters gives Shroud, and then Forever After is unblockable. So now that we've seen all the ways that we can make Curie bigger and draw a bunch of cards, what are we actually doing with those cards? We do have, obviously, some extra card draw with the usual suspects like Ring, Rhystic Study, and Mystic Remora, but we also have Entity Tracker. We are playing a number of enchantments, more enchantments than we would normally be playing because of all the auras to give evasion to our commander and things like Ensoul Artifact and whatnot. Then our main way to win is going to be Lab Man. So we want an easy enough way that we can just have one card that's going to win the game, and Lab Man is the easiest way. It's not Thassa's Oracle, because hypothetically we could draw in such an amount that maybe we would be left with some cards left in our library, and we also want to be able to just like win instantly. Bunch of counter spells. We need ways of protecting our commander, and that's why we're running things like Force of Negation, because we're drawing so many cards that we can just afford to have this. Lotus Petal, it's important we get our commander out faster, so this is a quick way to do that. Pretty straightforward mono base, mostly mono blue with, a few other cards, because why not? Then a second win condition is Psychic Corrosion, so just in case Lab Man wasn't good enough, we do have this other one. We're going to be drawing a lot of cards, and we could potentially mill out our opponents using this. Then we want a whole bunch of protection, so we want to be able to pump our Curie, draw cards, cast our combo pieces without our opponents interacting with us. And to that end, we're going to have a bunch of cards that grant hexproof or ward or make our stuff uncounterable. In particular, some of these bigger ones like Leer and Teferi. Although, do note that cards like Leer and Teferi have significant downsides. So although these cards do completely protect us during opponents' turns, they also have the problem of, for example, Leer makes every spell uncounterable, period, not just ours. So if an opponent has a combo to go off with, neither us nor any of our other opponents will be able to counter them. Same type of deal with Teferi. Everyone can only play spells at sorcery speed. So if one opponent goes to combo and we don't have anything open, but let's say one of our other opponents has a counterspell open, well, they can't play that counterspell either. And then we have like a whole bunch of, random hexproof instants just to keep Curie alive. Some ramp, although not that much. Again, our commander is only 2 mana, so we don't have to ramp too much, and we want as much of this quick stuff as we can get to get Curie out as quickly as possible. And things like, Mox Amber can protect it afterwards. And then we need a little bit of removal. I have slanted the removal into being enchantments, so like Eaten by Piranhas, Unable to Scream, and Witness Protection, specifically because Entity Tracker draws cards off of enchantments. Then we have some stacks for our mono blue deck, so Harbinger of the Seas, Back to Basics. We don't have anything that has an ETB trigger, so Torpor Orb and Winter Moon. If you or your playgroup are not a fan of these stack strategies, you can easily cut them and the deck will still function. And then these guys, Phyrexian Dreadnought and Phyrexian Soulgorger. So one of the abilities on Curie is to exile an artifact creature and gain, basically become a copy of that creature, except retain the draw cards ability. So something like Dreadnought can be a card where we go Dreadnought, and then before we have to sacrifice it, immediately exile and copy it, and then our Curie becomes a 12/12. Obviously great. Phyrexian Soulgorger, not as good, costs more, and is not as big. The main issue here being the fact that it costs more, so we have to have a whole bunch of mana available. Although we can hypothetically cast Soulgorger, and then even if we don't have the mana to copy it immediately, when it comes back around to our turn and the cumulative upkeep trigger goes off, we can just sack it, or not sack it, but exile it then to Curie, and then we don't have to sack it because it's already gone. There was also a handful of other cards that I thought about, so mainly Crypto Thrall and Padim to make Curie permanently hexproof. I ultimately decided that we probably didn't need either of these creatures because they're just expensive at 4 mana, but these are some other options that you could look at for playing. And so with all that said, that is going to do it for Curie Emergent Intelligence in EDH.